Podcasting live at the time we recorded it. From the studios in downtown Gulfport, Florida, it's WGAB, the GabCast.
Welcome back to WGAB, the GabCast, the Gabber newspaper production. I'm Patrick Hines, news and politics reporter for the Gabber newspaper, and I'm sitting here with...
My name is Sebastián González de León y León. I'm the editor and publisher for San Pedro Gazette. It's a new publication here in St. Pete. And I've been focusing mostly on the Ray Hines deal that has given me a lot to write about. The mission of this is to cover civic-oriented issues, as well as scientific and social issues.
Sebastian is very active in St. Pete, and if you've read the Gabber recently, you've definitely seen his coverage in elections and Kenneth City especially. That's been a big thing. But like you said, today we're going to be talking about the Ray Hines deal. But first of all, I just want to give a quick thank you to the Wine House out here in Gulfport for letting us film down here and providing us with some great wine and always tacos on Tuesday. So thank you to the Wine House. But yeah, let's get into the Ray Hines deal. So what is this? Can you tell me a little bit about this? I mean, you've been following this very closely. And if you could just give me a little bit of, obviously I know, but if you could give me a little bit of background for...
Yeah, of course. So the Ray Hines deal is kind of like what has been following, after decades of negotiations and community talks about what to do with the land around Tropicana Field or the historic gas plant district. For context, the historic gas plant district used to be a neighborhood for Black St. Pete residents. They were, of course, moved through eminent domain.
Yeah.
And since then, the city has tried to redevelop the area. Of course, the first time it didn't go through. They built the stadium. They put the Rays there. And now this deal kind of carries a lot of historic significance for the area. But the main objective of the Ray Hines deal is to keep the Rays here. At least that's what the presentation during the Committee of the Whole back in October in St. Pete showcased.
So if you don't mind me jumping in, I wrote something short about the gas plant redevelopment. And like you said, it was historically a place where there were a lot of black residents and they were displaced, and that district around Tropicana Field now has gone from a smaller community to kind of bustling, and they're planning on redeveloping it, at least the area where the field is. But from your understanding of the deal, do you think that it's going to get back to what it was historically, or will it kind of fall into the rest of the development in St. Pete that's continuing to kind of gentrify the area and high rent and not being affordable and pretty much catering to the same things that kicked people out of that district in the first place?
Yeah. First off, I've seen little evidence that suggests that it will go to, repair kind of like what happened all those decades ago. And the other part to your question is, I don't know. So far, the redevelopment details that have been made public state that there will be, of course, amenities. They are planning
restaurants.
They're promising a museum. Like offices and so on. But where it kind of starts getting a little bit off the rails with that is with the housing part.
Yeah.
So they're planning. Their Ray Hines proposal includes 6,000 housing units, of which 4,800 would go to market rate housing, so
pretty high.
With the housing prices today.
I'm looking for a place to live right now, and it's rough. Private room up there, 1,000, 1,100 a month.
Yeah,
it's rough.
Yep. And the other 1,200 units, they're promising to make them affordable housing or workforce housing.
Yeah.
For this, the Rays have allocated, like a part of their budget to what they're calling equity commitments.
Yes.
And and this is the part where it gets tricky because the way St. Pete has been kind of like allocating housing in order to house people with lesser income or limited budget is using the area median income for a reference, right?
Okay.
But from the affordable housing they have promised so far, only 600 qualify as affordable housing. So
Really?
yeah, like 80%. Well, this is based on conversations I
Yeah.
heard during the Community Benefits Advisory Council. They were talking about how 80% AMI and 60% AMI area median income. Like I believe the area median income is probably roughly, 70K a year.
Yeah.
So whoever makes 80% of that would be able to apply to these 300 units, and whoever makes 60% of that would go to the other 300. The rest of the housing units are for people who make 100% AMI and 120% AMI.
Okay. So
So
not quite affordable.
no, I mean that's why they're calling it like workforce affordable housing, but
But
really,
there's a difference between those. There's a difference that's come up in Gulfport meetings about affordable housing being a nationwide issue that it's hard to solve.
Yeah.
But workforce housing is a different story when it comes to affordable housing is where somebody can live and work a job where they're not making that much. Workforce housing is somebody has a full-time job, they're going to work every day, but their income isn't that high. They can still afford, like you said, 60 to 80% of the average income of that area.
Yeah.
And that difference kind of makes it so that it's easy for these cities to say, oh, we're building affordable housing. No, you're building workforce housing, and there is a difference.
Yeah, no, it sure is.
Yeah.
And the other part of this kind of like affordable housing part that has really caught my attention has been the delivery dates. So during the CBAC, some committee members pointed out that the timelines were, raised some eyebrows, to put it mildly.
Were they? I'm unfamiliar. Were they was it like in 5 years or was it like in 6 months?
So let me just get in the
Yeah, of
timeline
course.
of the Raise Heinz deal, just for the audience can follow a little bit of what's going on. So in October 2023, the Raise Heinz deal was presented in the Committee of the Whole of St. Pete.
Okay.
Then in the late fall of last year, Council member Richie Floyd proposed a straw poll, which was non-binding. So if whatever the people would say, like it wouldn't matter at the end of the day for the deal, but it would still be a data point to gauge the support for the deal.
Yeah.
And this was it died in the council meeting. It was barely rejected.
Wow.
But this happened around November last year. And after that, the CBAC meetings, its Community Benefits Advisory Council meetings, took place in January and February. And so after the CBAC happened, they kind of like rubber stamped the deal with a couple of recommendations.
Okay.
And they sent that to the city council so that they can evaluate it and approve it if they find it, depending on their position regarding the benefit and so on. So the deal aims to start construction in fall of this year.
Oh, okay.
So they're contingent on
Is that
the
on?
decision.
That's on the stadium or the housing?
The stadium.
Okay.
Phase one of the deal.
Okay.
And it has several phases, but they're aiming to open the ballpark in 2027, so that they can,
That's pretty soon to. Because what is it? It's $6 billion ballpark or something, they said.
I'll get back to that in a
Yeah,
second.
it's a couple of $1 billion ballpark. That's a lot to build in 3 years.
So yeah, so because this is the timeline, then matching it with the affordable housing, the original proposal said that they would deliver only the first 300 housing units for affordable and workforce housing by 2030.
Wow.
Then the next 300 by 2037. Then the next 300 by 2042. And the last 300 by 2047.
So they're going to build a $6 billion ballpark in 3 years, but 1,200 affordable houses in, what did you say, 10 years?
Well, it's right now in 23 years, it would deliver the 1,200 housing
23
units.
years to build 1,200 housing units.
Yeah.
3 years to build a $6 billion ballpark.
Yeah. And
Okay.
Just going back to the number, several numbers have been thrown around. I still need to kind of like zoom in to understand the math behind it.
Yeah.
But what has been made public by the city is that this project will cost at least $1.2 billion.
Okay.
Of which the city of St. Pete is contributing $287.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And the county will be providing $312.5 million as well.
The rest of that is taxpayer money, probably?
Well, this is already taxpayer money.
Yeah, that's not the right word. Yeah.
Yeah, but the rest would be footed by the raise.
Okay.
But this is where people have kind of like taken issue with this because, there's a city contributions that are gonna be paid with bonds, but then at the end of the day, the taxpayers are the ones covering the expenses of all this.
Yeah.
And at least from the people I've been speaking to, like that's what they've been explaining to me. The other thing is that there's this equity commitment by the raise, which is $50 million, but at the same time the city is contributing already, so it's like who's giving who, and so I'll be honest, like that part.
There's a lot of money being thrown into one pool by everybody, and then the money's going in, and then they're going to decide where it goes. Yeah.
And
they're saying, here's the plan, here's the amount of money. Now let's decide.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing about the deal that has been kind of like interesting to learn about has been, for example, right now, the land that would be redeveloped belongs to the city, right?
Okay.
It's publicly owned city.
Yeah.
Belongs to the public, it's administered by the government. And right now it's a parking lot. So, a lot of people are like, okay, sounds like a good idea to redevelop this. But if the deal goes through, the land, if I'm understanding correctly, based on the conversations in the council meetings, the land would become county owned. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm still, I reached out last week to the city to ask, for some clarification about what would be the relationship in terms of administering a piece of land inside, St. Petersburg's city limits.
Yeah.
And part of the deal is that the Rays and Hines developers would be paying for the sale of the land, $105.2 million. But again, during the CBAC meetings, it was discussed that the land has been valued at $330 million. So the transaction seems to be making, giving the land for a lower
hefty discount. Yeah, I mean over half.
Over
half.
It's almost a third of the price.
That's.
So this was just to kind of tell you a little bit of like what has been being talked about, but of course there's people who are excited.
Look, when it comes down to it, it's an area that is historically significant to the city that that historical significance was pushed out, and they're removing the thing that pushed it out and saying we're going to give back to the community and add this district back because this area has history that we're forgetting about.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you coming on and giving some about
course.
that. I'm sure we're going to read even more of your work when you continue to cover that. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Yeah, thank you, Pat.
And we'll be right back with Kathy with a Cop on WGAB, the GabCast.
Did you know, in 1968, our founder, George Brand, started the Gabber newspaper, then called the Gulfport Gabber, to hold Gulfport City Council accountable. Read more of our City Council coverage and learn about our policies on reporting, fact-checking, and funding. Visit thegabber.com.
All right, welcome back to Kathy with a Cop. Kathy with the Chief. Hi, Chief.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, here at the wine house, enjoying
cheers.
my post.
Cheers.
There, I won't even make you bump the wine since you're on the clock. So, we're talking a little bit about something that happened. I have a question, and I think this would be something that could benefit people who are just not newspaper reporters. Someone called the police department and wanted to file a criminal report against the Gabber.
Yes.
And I asked you about it, and you said, well, they don't get to make that decision. So can you explain that for people? Like, you call the police and say, I want to file a report because my neighbor spit on me and whatever. And it's not up to the person calling. It's up to the police officer. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, if you call the police, obviously, a police officer will come to your house or wherever you happen to be, or if you come to the station and say you want to speak to an officer, one will come out and meet you, and they will hear your story. But they have to evaluate what you're saying against the law. And if your account, your statement, does not rise to the level of being a crime, then they will inform you that and say, well, sorry, unfortunately, what you're reporting is not illegal.
People take that well, I think.
Depends. It very much depends. Some people are like, oh, wow, I'm surprised. I didn't know that. In fact, one of them was one we talked about on the GabCast a few months ago with the person who used the inappropriate language towards the
people riding the bike.
Yeah, the dog.
Yeah.
Why wasn't that a hate crime? So they wanted to report it as such, and we had to say, sorry, that's not against the law.
And that's not really something that's subjective.
Right.
Right. So it's not just like that particular police officer just doesn't like gay people.
Exactly. We look at what your claim is and compare it to what the statute says, and if it doesn't match, we'll write a report if need be. If, for example, maybe it doesn't constitute a crime in that particular case, but there maybe was an issue that could result in one later on. And we want the information in a report, so in case something does come up, we know where to go look.
I found this out with one of my neighbors where we had an incident and was not a crime, but there was a report. And then we found out that another neighbor who no longer lives there was a history of other reports with this same neighbor. So sometimes I guess it's something you could look at. If something ever happened that was a crime, you could look back and go, well, there have been issues for years.
And either way, somehow it's documented. So the officer can write a criminal report if it's a crime. If they don't think it's a crime, but they think it needs to be documented, then they write an incident report. Even if they don't do that, the very fact that you called the police
There's a
in the
call
first
log,
place, yeah, it's in the call log and the notes are there, and that's the record itself. So it's not like it gets buried or anything.
Well, thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
Can I ask another question?
Of course.
This came
I'm
up.
here.
I know. Well, this came up in council, and it's in the paper this week. Laws about sleeping in public.
Oh yeah.
What the hell? Because it's something that happened on a state law, and you're the one who told me years ago being homeless is not a crime.
Right.
Supreme Court said. City manager told me the Supreme Court also said sleeping in public is not a crime. So what's happening now?
Okay. Try and make this less complicated than I have to. In fact, yesterday, the Supreme Court was hearing this very issue. And what happened is the Ninth Circuit, west coast of the United States, Court of Appeals said a long time ago that the government cannot tell people that they can't sleep in public as long as there are shelter spaces available. The only way you can say you can't sleep in public is if I don't have a space to put you. So, I'm sorry, the other way around. If I do have a space to put you. So, the Supreme Court has, until yesterday, never taken that up on appeal, which means that law would apply nationwide. So, in Gulfport, our response to the recent state law, which was passed this past session, was, well, in order to comply with the state law, we have to prohibit people from sleeping in public.
And the state law says what exactly?
It says that governments, cities and counties, cannot allow people to sleep in public. So what we're in this little weird position right now. We're waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court based on the hearing they had yesterday, while our own ordinance will not go into effect until October.
Right. So we have, and I don't want to call them out by name because they're not here to speak for themselves and they are private individuals, but we have at least one or two very well locally known people who appear to not have a home. Who one of them is living on the Tangerine Greenway, has refused any offers of help.
Yes.
What's going to happen to him?
Well, once the law is passed and in effect, we'll communicate. Actually, we're going to spend time between now and then making sure that anyone who might be impacted by the law are aware of it. And then come October 1st, that's when we'll start enforcement. And if you're sleeping in public between 9 at night and 6 in the morning, at first you'll get a warning. And if you do it again, then we'll take you up to the jail for violating the ordinance.
So it's going to be something that comes with jail time.
Oh, it could, absolutely.
Do you have the option of making this something that is complaint driven?
Everything is. That's my philosophy. I've told you that before. We enforce every law in the city based on data. So the data is either people are reporting crimes or people are complaining about ordinance violations. And that's across the board. So obviously this would be in the same way. But I can tell you that we already get a lot of complaints about it. Unfortunately, we have to tell people it's not illegal as of yet.
Well, I mean, that's my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I have not witnessed this person harassing anybody or doing anything undesirable. Simply, it's an uncomfortable reminder that society isn't what it could be, right? So I don't want to step into that, but I appreciate the explanation. I think our viewers and our listeners appreciate the explanation. And then there was something in the paper a week or two ago, and we didn't have you on the podcast, and I wanted to thank you
for not being on it?
No.
Thanks for not being on the podcast.
No. A citizen came up to you and asked you why you weren't doing anything about the noise surrounding the Sazerac Lounge, and you said, essentially, they're not violating, the noise isn't violating anything, and they asked you if you possible to change the ordinance, and I think your words were something to the tune of, do you really want me to change the law to go after a black club? And I don't think a lot of people speak that frankly, and I just appreciated it. So
yeah, it needed to be said. Some people have suggested we change the law, and no, that's not the right move. Either they're complying with the law or they're not. And I can promise you we have more noise violations within a block of where we're sitting than we have over there.
It's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been past both things at night, and I would tend to agree with you that downtown is far louder, and people are more upset about it. But
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you, Chief.
Of course.
I'll see you next week, I hope.
Enjoy the wine.
I will, and you already had your ice cream.
Of course.
Your podcast ice cream.
Now I'm going to walk back to the office.
All right.
Burn
Well,
the
have a great
calories
day. We'll be
you.
right back with WGAB, the podcast, the GabCast.
Find all your Gulfport and Tampa Bay Beaches news and things to do at thegabber.com.
Welcome back to WGAB, the GabCast. I'm Cameron Healy, the assistant editor for the Gabber newspaper, and I brought along my lovely hometown bestie, Courtney Chenard.
Hello.
Her occupation is a high school teacher, so she's not a journalist like me, but that is totally fine because she went with me to Mainsail Art Festival in downtown St. Petersburg at the Vinoy Park. So she's on vacation, but I decided to take her to a little annual festival. It's actually not that little. It was
big.
ginormous. Like there was so much. Every time you walked around a corner, there was another art booth. It was a lot.
It went on for miles.
So this was the 49th annual Maine Sale Art Festival. It's actually, I found out that it was a nonprofit organization, all run by volunteers. I was so shocked. I thought it was going to be at least like, not thought. Feel like everybody's profiting nowadays. So the fact that it was nonprofit, I thought that was really nice. And any money that we bought lemonade at the concessions.
We did.
So
it was good.
it was so good. So that will be going towards next year's art festival.
Oh, that's really cool.
Right? So this year we got to see over 250 juried artists throughout Florida and the nation. Because we saw some that weren't from Florida that was like, there was somebody from Pennsylvania, something like that. So we got to see a lot of Florida artists and nationwide artists. This year, the award winner, the first place winner was William Kidd. He won the Best of Maine Sale Gold Award, which ended up giving him a $10,000 prize money, which was crazy. He won in the category of ceramics.
Yeah,
it was like, it was like these like kind of creepy crawly looking things, but they honestly looked like seaweed. Or like
an octopus almost.
Yeah,
too,
like
with
little
the
tentacles or something. So he said that actually these organisms or whatever he sculpts were inspired by microorganisms, fungi, and seeds and
science guy.
sea life. Yeah, right. He's very much inspired by the beauty of nature. So I thought that was really cool, and he had some really neat ceramics. But then they also had a poster artist, which every year they choose a artist within the 250 that are there and kind of sponsor their art and their biography and things about them. So this year was Stephanie Ann, and she is a painter. She had some really vibrant landscape paintings. They kind of looked like the trees from the Lorax.
Yeah, the truffula trees.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, they were very colorful and like almost like looked fluffy.
Yeah,
like all
super
of the
vibrant.
leaves. Yeah, like, and even the like floor of the woods that she's like painting had that feel to it. And it was really, really cool. So she got to have a tent with just a bunch of her art hanging along the booth walls. And she kind of said she wasn't sure of like how to categorize her paintings, but she said it was her own take on Impressionism, which is pretty neat.
Very
I think,
unique.
right? She definitely was saying a lot of her paintings feel unique to that because of the color choices that she makes and what she's making in general. So we got to see her stuff, and then we went to see Alan Boatwright. He was one of the 15 artists who had won the Award of Distinctions, which means he won $1,000 along with 15 other people. He actually does mixed media, this is the robot guy. So he paints like robots doing things, like everyday life stuff. And he had this one of robots that was like, kind of like a vision or what is it called? Like a point of view of them, like of you looking up and there's robots looking
They're, like,
at
looking
you.
down at you.
Yeah, and there's like on each side, and he said you could turn it, like he like flipped it and like.
And I had a on and off switch, so it was interactive. The whole art.
Yeah,
piece
like
was.
you could turn it on and then it would turn off. It like had like a mechanical hand.
Yeah, it was really intricate.
Yeah, it was crazy. So he had that, and he's actually from Pinellas Park, so he's still around this area. So that was really neat to see. And he said that he paints with an industrial influence. So
And
I thought that was really neat.
All of his art told a really cool story.
Yeah,
too.
he had
from, like the news. And
there was the news one was he had superheroes and villains in a public bathroom, and they were like in stalls. On each of the stalls, there was like graffiti of 2023, I think, newspaper headlines.
Yeah.
It was so crazy because you wouldn't know that unless like you looked into it or at least knew what the headline was.
Yeah, it was really creative.
It was interesting. So those stuck out because I remember we walked by and we were like, we need to go look in there. Yeah. That one was cool. So we got to go see that guy. And then we also saw Alex Lanier. He's a Miami artist. He does ink and mixed media, digital media. He does digital mixed media. That's what he considered it. But he was the one that I was like, whoa, that, like, every picture you saw, you were like, wait, that's moving.
Yeah.
It was
It
crazy.
had the animation in the screen, which was really cool.
Yeah, there was a couple. There was the, what was the one that was, I thought it was like a carnival one. And then there was the kid with the cape.
In his room with the fan, and his cape was
Yes,
blowing
there
in
was
the
a
wind.
fan. Yes. So he said that he sketched out this picture first of this kid sitting on the bottom bunk of his bunk bed, and then on the top bunk was like a bunch of like carnival, like theme park stuff. Like there was a Ferris wheel, there was zoo animals, and then there was like airplanes and rockets and such. And it said something along the jungle, something like that. And then you look down and there's this kid and his little cape is flapping and there's a fan, and it was really neat because I first saw it and I did not think that thing was moving, and then you look and you're like, oh my god, like, oh my god,
because there was a physical screen in the paintings that was doing the movement, and then the painting itself stayed still.
Yeah, he was saying that he did the stop motion animation after the sketch and then incorporated a screen behind the canvas.
Yeah, I'd never seen anything like that.
Oh my god, it was crazy. Yeah, I just remembered the other one was a girl, I think it was a girl or a boy, and that was a sketch standstill, and then on the back was butterfly wings.
Yeah, flying through the city.
Yeah, that was really crazy. So I really liked his stuff, and he was one of the 10 artists who received an award of excellence, which meant he was able to get $1,500.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Lastly, I was so surprised when we walked by this one. This is by Serena Frizzell. She makes mixed media art of portraits, black and white portraits with dice, black and white dice. And she had like, we were walking by, there was like Tiger Woods.
Yeah, a bunch of famous figures.
Salvador Dali. Who else was there? There was like somebody else. But there was a bunch of portraits. So she makes, it was Frida Kahlo, that's who it was. She has portraits out of dice. And she was like, it's kind of like a paint by number when I make the sketch.
Because every die with a different amount of dots creates a different shade
and
of
like,
gray. So she can use it as like scale.
Yeah, it was
really
a grayscale that was like every color, every black side, or like they were white dice with like black dots. Oh, it was so crazy. Once you walked up there, you were like, that's dice.
So
like,
much detail goes into that. It was.
I can't even comprehend how you like organized that.
I know.
So that was insane. But she unfortunately did not get any award. I was surprised.
Maybe next year.
She has to.
Yeah.
Next year, it's a goal. So that was really neat and cool and fun. And I think everybody should go check that out.
I'd go again.
Right?
Yeah.
Like every corner you
There's something for
turned,
everybody.
right? There was
all different types of art.
It was.
Jewelry,
And ceramics.
leather,
Oh my god, there
woodworking.
was like a bunch of like woodwork, and who else did something that we were like, whoa. There was a lot of sculptures too, and just a lot of painting and photography. So anything for everybody. And they also had a mime walking around. Guys, the mime walked up to Courtney. What'd she do? Tap you on the shoulder?
Tap me on the shoulder. She really got me. I looked. And
It was
she
so funny. Courtney goes, oh, you got me.
I didn't know what to do.
You got me. Like this mime
I was
followed us.
uncomfortable.
It was so crazy. But her name, I think, is Deanna.
She did a
Deanna the
great
mime.
job. She was a really good mime.
Dude, yeah. She knew what she was doing. I didn't know mimes still existed. Very surprised. But she was there, and she got Courtney.
Yeah, she got me good. She did.
So that was what was going on with the Mainsail Art Festival. I had a good time.
Yeah.
But thanks, everybody, for listening and watching to WGAB, the GabCast. Bye.